بله.
I want to thank Madam Rajavi.
Dear Iranian friends,
اجلاس سالانه گروههای پارلمانی دوستان ایران آزاد با شرکت نمایندگان پارلمان اروپا و پارلمانترهای 20 کشور انگلستان، آلمان، فرانسه، ایتالیا، سوئیس، فنلاند، نروژ، ایسلند، هلند، بلژیک، اسپانیا، پرتغال، ایرلند، رومانی، مالت، لیتوانی، اسلوونی، لهستان، سن مارینو و استرالیا.
گرامیداشت سالگرد سرنگونی دیکتاتوری شاه در ایران. حمایت از مبارزه مردم و مقاومت ایران برای سرنگونی دیکتاتوری مذهبی و از شورای ملی مقاومت ایران به عنوان جایگزین واقعی رژیم و استقرار یک جمهوری دموکراتیک و کثرت‌گرا مبتنی بر جدایی دین و دولت.
سخنرانی‌های جولیو ترتزی، جان پری، ماریو گالئا و رومئو نیکوارا. قسمت پنجم.
جولیو ترتزی، رئیسی یک جنایتکار کاملا شناخته شده به خاطر قتل عام و نسل کشی در سال 1367 است. حسابرسی از کشتار وحشتناک و جنایتکارانه سفیر کاظم رجوی یک گام ابتدایی در حسابرسی از نسل کشی توسط رژیم جنایتکار است.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's a great pleasure to congratulate President-elect Mrs. Maryam Rajavi for this extremely important event. It is an important event, in my opinion, because it shows the extent of the momentum that your fight, Madam Rajavi, but it is also our fight, the fight of all persons of goodwill who cannot look at to the other side and just ignore or pretend that the horrors which are happening in your wonderful country are not taking place. These horrors are there, and you have described wisely and very clearly. There is an increased revolt, an increasing revolt which is going on. It's not only a question of demonstration, dissatisfaction, voices against the regime. This has been, over the last 3-4 years, an entire country which is rising up on its feet and trying to get rid of a criminal and murderous regime which has been there for too long, for more than 40 years now. And then there has been the demonstration, as you mentioned, and it has been important that this question has been addressed by a number of personalities today, starting with yourself, Madam President, the question of the much increased capability of the resistance, the MK and all the organizations, but also individual, to penetrate the regime first and foremost, the kind of action which has been probably the most spectacular and effective has been the penetration of more than 20, 25 TV and radio stations and embarrassing deeply the regime. And this clear demonstration of revolt and this is a way of refusing the continuation of this regime in public media and such a forceful tool which has been used. So I'm just mentioning these few examples, but there is no doubt that the action that the National Council of Resistance Iran and all the friends who are around this table, this virtual table today, all these actions combined have created a new momentum that we have reinforced, continue, and expand as much as we can, and even more than we can. Because this momentum is focused on certain aspects, which are not only political or are not only revolutionary aspects, but they are aspects and elements of international justice. International justice now at the national level in some countries, in Belgium, in Switzerland, in Sweden, have shown that the regime has been caught with many smoking guns in its hands. Many smoking guns which show that this is a terrorist regime, is the #1 state terror in the world. Terrorist state in the world, #1. But it's not only has not been qualified as not to be qualified #1 terrorist state only because of the last 3 or 4 years or 5 years. It has been a terrorist state since the beginning. In its DNA, the terrorist activity has been always a fundamental part of its foreign security and defense policy. Terrorist activities across the board, all over. In the region, against the opposition, and all over the world, in Latin America, North America, and Europe especially. The criminal, the terrible killing of Ambassador Qasem Rajavi now is something that is determining, hopefully, a completely new approach in legal terms and judiciary terms, and it qualifies as an element, as step of a large genocidal operation which was carried on by this criminal regime. So I'm referring to this aspect that has been already discussed to say that there is an extraordinary momentum which probably has been unique and mounting thanks to your leadership, Madame Rajavi, but also to the increased support that it takes place within the country and worldwide, and especially through these groups of Friends of a Free Iran in national parliament, in the European Parliament, and among the media. But there is no doubt that this organization, the resistance, the MEK, and all the good, the people, peace-loving people, Friends of Iran, are on the right track, and this is a winning way of action. Your policies, your 10 points, and the political aspects and human dignity that you are representing and that we want to support. Thank you very much.
جان پری: ما از شورای ملی مقاومت ایران به عنوان جایگزین دموکراتیک که توانایی برقراری جمهوری دموکراتیک، کثرت‌گرا و غیر هسته‌ای را دارد و از طرح 10 ماده‌ای خانم مریم رجوی حمایت می‌کنیم.
I'd like to take a few moments to address the issue of Europe's policy on Iran, regarding Iran. The underlying policy of Europe with Iran over the years can be summed up in making concessions and appeasement. I think that the time for this must stop. For years, it was perceived that silence and a lenient approach can facilitate Iran changing course and moderate its conduct, but this hasn't happened. As a result of this policy, for years, one-sided economic and political concessions were made to Tehran, often to the detriment of the Iranian people and the resistance movement. I believe that the falsehood of this view and its disastrous results are before us. This approach simply failed to deal with the growing threats posed by the regime against international peace and security. Quite diametrically, the European government's silence, which is intolerable, and leniency have been a significant enabler for the Tehran regime to continue its horrendous domestic crimes against foreign terrorism, nuclear ambition, and complete impunity to date. And we must call on the European national governments. We have a lot of debates on Zoom over the last 2 years, and unfortunately, the European Union to date haven't to adopt a more firm and decisive policy towards the Iranian regime to condemn 4 decades of crimes against humanity and genocide perpetrated by this regime. I think it's time for straight talk, action, and more results to take the lead on the referral of the dossier of the regime's crimes to the UN Security Council. We should lend our support to and can cooperate with the National Council of Resistance of Iran as a viable democratic alternative to the regime, which has the capability to establish a democratic, pluralistic, and non-nuclear republic. Elected officials of the people of Europe, elected parliamentarians, should endorse the NCRI President-elect Marianne Rajavi's 10-point plan for the future of Iran, which very much is in the line with the principles and values of a European democracy, envisioned free elections, gender equality, the abolition of the death penalty, and Sharia law. Equality before the law for the Iranian religious and ethnic minorities, peaceful coexistence with the country's neighbours, and a non-nuclear Iran. Finally, we strongly recommend that the EU, the member states, and other European governments and national officials acknowledge the right of the Iranian people and their organisations' resistance to topple the regime in Iran to establish democracy and the people's sovereignty.
ماریو گالئا. خانم رجوی، دید خستگی ناپذیر شما نسبت به یک ایران آزاد دیگر فقط یک امید نیست، یک رؤیا نیست، اکنون واقعیتی است در شرف وقوع.
Thank you very much. Dear Iranian friends, Madam Rajavi, first of all, I have to salute you, Madam Rajavi, for putting yourself and that of your family in the line of fire against this brutal regime to stand up for the human rights of your people in Iran. What you, Mr. Rajavi, Mrs. Rajavi, Madam Rajavi is doing and what your colleagues are doing is indeed very commendable. We all know the desperate situation in Iran. The level of poverty has now reached unprecedented levels. Numerous homeless people are living in abandoned vehicles, buses, or living in graveyards. Countless hungry Iranian children are wandering desperately in the streets of Iran, begging for scraps of food. Across Iran, you could see adverts affixed to tree trunks with a bright advert, an advert saying kidneys for sale, followed by a contact number. It is appalling, surreal, sickening that many Iranian peoples are risking their lives selling their kidneys in the black market in a desperate effort to be able to put food on the tables for their children. This is a story of an atrocious regime who chooses nuclear proliferation and financing international terrorism rather than feeding its own people. This is a story of a ruthless regime that squanders and steal people resources and opportunities and starving them to death and suppressing their freedoms and human rights. So thank you, Madam Rajavi, for being an inspiration for your brave people in Iran. Madam Rajavi, your relentless vision of a free Iran is no longer a hope. It is no longer a dream. It is now a reality waiting to happen. Madam Rajavi, please allow me to conclude by addressing my colleagues who are joining us here today from across the world. To you all, dear friends, I sincerely say thank you for standing up to be counted. Thank you for deciding to be on the right side of history. Thank you for being the moral compass of this world, which is under general anesthesia. Regretfully, we are living in a world which is heavily sedated by indifference, selfishness, stupidity, or short-sightedness. A world which foolishly chooses to wait till tomorrow to condemn crimes against humanity in Iran rather than acting today to prevent them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gala. Thank you.
رومئو نیکوارا: دولت‌های غربی باید در مقابل رژیم ایران قاطعیت نشان دهند و در کنار مردم ایران بایستند. رژیمی که ما با آن مواجهیم، رژیم قتل عام و ابراهیم رئیسی نتیجه آن است.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Mrs. Mariam Rajavi. Good evening, dear friends from the Iranian opposition and dear colleagues from all over Europe and the world abroad. Let me just express a few ideas on behalf of the Romanian Committee for Iranian Free Iran. As someone who has followed Iranian affairs for more than 10 years, I can confidently say that the policy of Western governments has been to come to terms with religious dictatorship. In practical terms, this meant giving in to the mullahs' blackmail. As said, it is, the policy has had dire consequences and has been very costly for the Iranian people and the Iranian resistance, and the West on some of the most important issues. On the nuclear issue itself, the Iranian resistance exposed the regime's secret nuclear sites in Natanz and Arak in 2002. One would have expected that the West would hold firm and force the regime to dismantle its nuclear program from the outset, but nothing happened. On the issue of human rights, we are all familiar with the tragic story of the massacre of 30,000 political prisoners in Iran in 1988. One has witnessed deafening silence by European governments on what has been described as the largest massacre of political prisoners since World War II. Western policies toward Iran was sometimes so wrong-headed that on many occasions we have failed to even discern on our vital national security imperatives. We are all familiar with the fact that last year, around this time, a senior Iranian diplomat was convicted by a Belgian court for his role as the mastermind of the plot to bomb the gathering of the NCRI in June 30, 2018, which was attended by more than 100,000 people from all over the world. The regime terrorist who carried the bomb was a working diplomat, and he was sentenced 20 years in prison as an unprecedented development in the world today. The court ruling provided an excellent opportunities for European governments to round up and deport the Iranian regime mercenaries and dormant terrorist cells in Europe. But we all witnessed some inaction and silence of the part of the West while dealing with the immediate security of our own citizens. Let me say this, the appeasement policy, it's not good. It's really enough. It's wrong and it's detrimental. Western governments must show firmness and stand to the side of the people and resistance as they work for change. The regime we are facing is a regime which we could describe as a regime of massacre, and its president, Ibrahim Ra'isi, being its outcome. Thank you very much, dear friends, for your attention, and I wish you all the best. Goodbye.